Part 3. Deceptions. Previously on Ghost Creek. Penny Thompson returned to her family farm after her father died suddenly. Penny is haunted by memories of her mother, who died of cancer when Penny was a teenager, and the tragic death of her brother Eric in a car accident. Penny expected to sell the farm to the town of Westfield, which made a deal with Penny's father to keep the land undeveloped in exchange for a monthly payment. This allowed Farmer Gary to keep the farm active without needing to turn a profit on the agriculture. The mayor, Chester Allman, showed up on Penny's first day back in town to let her know that she could stay and work the farm under the open space deal, or she could collect the $450,000 purchase price on the sale of the farm. All her plans for a quick escape from the memories of Westfield were dashed when a lightning strike fire on the property led to the discovery of a body buried in the embankment of the creek out by the cow pasture. While the police investigated the identity of the corpse, believed to be a boy between the ages of 18 and 20, Sheriff's Deputy Chuck Foreman, Penny's high school sweetheart, helped Penny by driving her to appointments and helping her work on cleaning up the old family tractor in the barn, which hadn't run in years, but which Penny wanted to repair and drive around the farm one last time. After her father's funeral, a real estate agent named Madden showed up at the farm and presented documents to Penny purporting to be a deal her father made to sell the farm to a group of developers after his death for $1 million. The deal was supposed to be in Gary Thompson's will, according to Madden. But when Penny and Chuck visited the family's lawyer for the reading of Gary's will, there is no mention of a deal with real estate developers. More importantly, the lawyer explained to Penny that, while the deal with Westfield prohibited her father from selling the land while he was alive, now that Penny owned the farm as Gary's heir, she had no such restrictions, and could stay or sell to whomever she chose. Part 3. Deceptions. Each day that summer seemed steamier than the last. The only thing hotter was Penny's temper. "You don't really want to do this," Chuck said for the fourth time. "It's not necessary and won't accomplish anything. Besides, you said you didn't want to work the farm. So if you're going to sell, then just sell. Why make trouble?" They were in the barn, where they had spent most of their time for the past few days. Chuck was a fair mechanic, and with his help they had overhauled the engine, reinflated the big tires, and cleaned the old tractor to something resembling its former glory. At least it was glorious to Penny. To Chuck, it still looked like an old tractor that had been washed. At least the hose water had been cool. They didn't mind being wet for a few minutes. But driving the old girl around the farm was still out of reach. Penny sat on a hay bale and removed the scrunchie from her golden hair, which spread over her shoulders. She noticed Chuck admiring her faded gray t-shirt with Mickey Mouse smiling from her chest. When she pulled her runaway ponytail back into place, with both hands behind her head, she felt the soft cotton pull across her unencumbered breasts. She remembered wearing the same shirt in that same barn when she and Chuck were 17. The memory made the shirt feel even tighter. "I'm pissed off at my father for not telling me, and I'm more pissed off at that lying bastard mayor." "Well, to be fair, your dad didn't know that he was going to die suddenly, and you didn't show much interest in the farm, so I can't say I'm surprised that he never explained to you the fine details of his deal with the town." "Whose side are you on?" Penny grabbed a handful of hay and flung it in Chuck's direction, watching it flutter harmlessly to the barn floor. Her old yellow lab, Duke, jumped after the stray hay blades. "I'm on your side, but I'm also trying to be objective. You certainly should be mad at the mayor. If the farm is really worth $1 million, and he's trying to pressure you into selling for half that—" "Less than half?" "Right, lots less. Well, that's nasty. He knows you don't want to stay, and he wanted you to sell before you discovered that the price is crap. So what? You gonna stay and work the farm just to spite him?" "Probably not," Penny groused and tossed a dirty rag onto the exposed tractor engine. "Probably?" Chuck stood a few feet from Penny in the filtered sunlight seeping into the expansive barn. "You really gotta decide." "I know." "Is there any chance you'd decide to stay?" Penny leaned one arm against the tractor, extending her hip and stretching. "I guess not. You disappointed?" Chuck moved forward. "I need to know what's happening here, Pen. It's been terrific hanging out with you. Should I get my hopes up?" Penny stepped closer. Chuck's sweat, mixed with spicy aftershave, tickled her nostrils. "Which would be better for you?" Chuck's arms encircled her waist as he pulled her close. "I'm not sure." He leaned in. Penny melted into the kiss, both familiar and brand new. Chuck's body was thicker and stronger than she remembered, yet his lips were as soft and gentle. She pressed against him, wrapping both arms around his neck and savoring a first kiss moment that both was and wasn't. The barn ceased to exist, along with the hay, the manure, and even the tractor. Every part of Penny's attention was riveted on her lips, then the tip of her tongue. Chuck pulled her tighter, massaging the small of her back through the thin t-shirt, 2 fingers sliding down to the exposed skin above her jeans. Then, disengaging for a breath, Penny buried her face against his chest and gently rocked from side to side. She thought about their senior prom as they slow-danced there in the barn to a memory of music, while Chuck's fingers explored under Penny's waistline, where perspiration along her spine formed a slippery canyon. Duke's urgent barking broke their trance as he pushed on the small door of the side of the barn and squeezed through, sounding his canine alarm. Outside, the lab growled as Arthur Madden, the real estate agent, walked slowly from his car toward the house. Penny called from the barn door and waved the man in the red sales jacket toward them. "Hello!" Madden bellowed jovially, holding up a hand and veering toward the barn. Penny and Chuck met him halfway, with Duke prowling their perimeter. When he got close enough to speak without shouting, Madden said, "Did you have a chance to view your father's will yet?" "We have," Chuck said, taking a position between Madden and Penny. "Turns out there's nothing in there about any real estate deal." "Well, that's disappointing." Madden held up his briefcase. "I've got all the paperwork here, amended to have your name, Miss Thompson. Your father was excited about getting you the best possible price for the land if he ever died. I'm sorry it was so sudden." "That's a nice story, mister." Chuck unconsciously followed his army and police training by assuming a defensive posture, as if the real estate agent was a physical threat. "Seems like maybe Penny will need to do some research to figure out how much the property is really worth. Maybe get some other offers, don't you think?" Madden allowed the briefcase to fall back to the end of his extended arm. "I can assure you that $1 million is the best offer you're going to find." Penny squatted down next to Duke, putting an arm around the dog's neck. "The mayor told me the same thing." "You mean the $450,000 option price in your father's open space agreement with the town, huh? He was lying to you." "Yeah, well, you also lied to me. You told me you and my father had a deal, but I don't see any signed agreement or anything in his will." Penny's tone of voice made Duke growl softly, his eyes fixed on the intruder. "I'm telling you the truth. Your father and I had a deal. He was supposed to put into his will that it was his wish that the farm be sold to my developer group at the price I quoted you, and that his executor would finalize the paperwork. He said you had abandoned the farm." Penny jumped to her feet and took a step toward the red jacket. Chuck reached out and gently grabbed her elbow to support her.
I have not abandoned anything.
Madden's smiling face never lost its fixed expression.
I'm sorry about the terminology there. That was your father's word. I know this is not a good time in your life, Miss Thompson, but the price is well above market. I can only keep the offer on the table for a short time. Well, why don't you let the lady think about it for more than a week after she buried her father? Chuck snapped. We have your card. We'll call you if Penny's interested. How's that?
Madden paused, looking at Penny for some sign of disagreement, but didn't see any.
Fine. I'll be in town till tomorrow. I'm not saying the deal is off the table after that, but I'll have to check in with my clients.
You do that, Chuck said dismissively, tilting his head in the direction of the man's car. When Madden had driven off, Chuck and Penny sat at the kitchen table sipping Cokes with Duke at their feet.
Finding that dead boy is still creeping me out. It's like there's nothing here but death.
You want me to stay with you tonight? I can sleep on the sofa. I don't want you to be alone.
Penny put a soft hand on Chuck's forearm.
Thanks. That's sweet. But I've got Duke with me. I've still got a ton of Dad's stuff to go through, so I'm not going to be much company.
I could help.
Chuck's sincere offer made her pause, but only for a second.
No, I need to do it myself.
I could watch.
Penny giggled.
I don't want you watching me, Chuck, but thank you.
How about I come by tomorrow and bring us some dinner? Deal?
How about I cook us some dinner? I need to use up the food in the fridge before it goes bad.
Penny held up her Coke glass to clink.
Deal,
Chuck responded, angling his Coke toward Penny's, his eyes fixed on Penny's smiling face. Chuck went through his daily duties as a deputy sheriff on Thursday, but his mind was elsewhere. The investigation into the body found on Penny's farm had not moved ahead. Sheriff Jack Baskins was waiting for an ID from the state crime lab or the FBI, which might take weeks. Nobody in the sheriff's office seemed in a rush to hunt for a murderer when the body was clearly years old and the chances of finding any useful clues without knowing the victim's identity were near zero. It was frustrating, but Chuck couldn't think of anything specific to suggest. At 6 o'clock, Chuck knocked on Penny's kitchen door and then let himself inside, Duke at his heels. There was no sign of any dinner preparations underway. He called out and heard a distant reply.
I'm upstairs.
Chuck found her sitting on the floor of her bedroom, a cardboard box next to her on the hardwood. Penny looked up at Chuck. Her eyes were red. Streaks from now-dried tears ran down the side of her face. She sniffed and struggled stiffly to her feet, then plopped down onto the bed.
I found a note from Eric. I found a note from Eric.
She trailed off and put her chin into her chest, sobbing softly. Chuck dropped to a knee on the floor next to her, putting a hand gently on her knee.
What is it?
Penny looked up at Chuck's kind face.
I think I may know who was buried out by the creek.
What did you find?
Chuck failed in his attempt to maintain a calm and professional voice. Penny sniffed and wiped away fresh tears with the back of her hand.
Eric, he left me a note. It was inside a book on my desk. He left me the book. I guess he expected me to take it after he...
She swallowed hard, fighting to keep her composure.
Chuck, it was a suicide note. Eric killed himself.
Chuck jumped up and sat next to Penny on the bed. She fell against his chest, sobbing without control or shame. He held her gently, without speaking, until she was ready to talk. After a minute, Duke jumped up onto the bed and licked Penny's salty tears. The dog's tongue made Penny laugh, breaking the avalanche of sadness. Chuck whispered, "I'm so sorry, Pen. We all thought it was an accident."
"I know. That's what everyone thought. But it wasn't. He drove into that tree on purpose."
"Did he say why? In the note?"
"Kind of. He said he couldn't go on living with Dad, and that he didn't want to live without Oliver."
"Who's Oliver?"
"I have an idea. I think it's the boy they dug up, out by the creek."
Penny dropped her head to the open shoebox filled with Eric's memories.
"Here."
She reached down and handed Chuck an envelope addressed to Eric.
"I found some letters Eric kept. Oliver lived in the city. You see, there's a return address. Eric and Oliver were friends."
"Do you know Oliver's last name?"
"No, there's nothing on the envelope or in the letters, just Oliver. But if that's his address, you should be able to check it out and see if Oliver is still alive or is missing, right?"
"Sure, right." Chuck took Penny's hand gently. "Pen, what makes you think this guy Oliver is our body?"
"I hope he's not."
She lowered her eyes.
"I just think he could be. Can't you check?"
"Okay." Chuck squeezed Penny's fingers. "But if it turns out that this guy is the one whose body we found, it's going to mean that your brother or your father might have been involved, and you're going to have to turn over those letters and Eric's note. They could be evidence." Penny's lip quivered as another tear slid down her cheek.
"Don't make me give them to you yet. They're all I have left of Eric."
She leaned into Chuck and buried her head on his shoulder. Penny wiped away another tear before looking sternly into Chuck's eyes.
"You can't tell anyone."
"What?"
"You heard me. This is our secret. It's Eric's secret. I'm going to keep it secret, and so are you."
"Pen, I'm a deputy. I can't keep it to myself."
"Why not? If you want to be here now for me, then you need to do this. Besides, what difference does it make? Who's going to care besides me?"
"But if somebody murdered that boy—"
"Then what?"
Penny's eyes were red from crying, but she shot daggers into Chuck's face.
"You think my brother killed him and buried him, and that's what drove Eric to suicide? Well, Eric's dead, so who cares?"
Chuck couldn't speak, but nodded slightly. "You want me to try to match up the body to this boy, Oliver?"
"Yes, I need to know."
"If I do that, I'm not going to be able to keep it secret. If we get a confirmation on the body, the sheriff needs to know." Penny was silent.
"Okay, I get it. But if you want to be here with me, I need to know you're on my side."
"I've always been on your side, Pen. You know that."
"You were back then. That was a long time ago. This isn't my home anymore."
"It could be."
"Yeah? Well, I'm not sure yet. But I know for damn sure that I don't need the whole town in a tizzy about my brother killing himself. That's not going to help me."
"You're right. I get it. I won't say anything. Thanks for telling me, Pen. I know that wasn't easy."
"It was horrible."
She dissolved into full-blown sobs again and held her arms out to Chuck. They hugged while Penny cried. Duke curled up on top of Penny's feet, sensing that she needed him, too.